Well, hello, everyone. So glad you are here to join us for our Ask the Expert show. I am thrilled to get to introduce you to our guest expert today. And in our conversation, we're speaking with Natalie Bellott, and she's going to be sharing with us about what trauma is, how we can begin to heal, and how to process our emotions. So Natalie, she's an experienced therapist. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner. She specializes in emotions, grief, and trauma. And she actually happens to be one of my dearest friends. Natalie and we worked together in hospice for several years, and she now owns her own private practice. She's been doing this for quite some time. And Natalie, I'm so glad we're doing this. Welcome.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. It's such a great, you're so experienced at this. I'm so glad to be here. And like Natalie said, we're close friends, and it's so awesome to be able to work with you in this and just to have a conversation around really big topics. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I know that this topic on trauma, it can feel intense and it can feel possibly triggering. So I'm wondering, like, how do you usually guide people in broaching this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's like not the conversation you have at cocktail parties, right? but when I have new clients or people who want to talk about and ask about like what is trauma, um, it's such a huge umbrella for a lot of experiences that we have in our lives. And I think one of the things that it's most important to note is that trauma is not the event, but the experience of the event. So something that may be big for me could be small for you, and vice versa. And when I say big and small, it could be like in our emotional or stress response to it. So like maybe the fear that I have of snakes could be bigger than you if I've had a run-in with a snake, or maybe saw someone get bit by a snake, or just a small example, and how it affects me physiologically, like what happens in my nervous system. And so, yeah, if anything about trauma is said, I really like to point that it's really more about the experience. And so what happens is a lot of people can kind of undermine their own experiences and say, well, it really wasn't a big deal. But when you really kind of look at how it's impacting you today, maybe it's something to be curious about and look at more to see what kind of hold it's had on you and how can we help process that. So
like, in other words, don't diminish it. Like if there's something that happens, it's better to like just with a gentle curiosity about it.
Yeah, it helps. Definitely, curiosity is like really helpful in exploring this, because you don't want to go in with the judgment of like, oh, well, that wasn't a big deal. If I couldn't handle that, then I must be weak, or some kind of other belief about myself that diminishes the experience. But working with trauma, the whole point is to help you truly move forward beyond the event itself, so that you can live life more full way, where maybe there's less fear. Yeah. Yeah, to talk about trauma, it's a really big topic, but I think
It's
that's
like
the thing.
it
Yeah.
could, and like like you were mentioning, like it could be something like being a fear of snakes, or like it's just all these shapes and sizes. When we think about trauma, a lot of times we think about some like war or some kind of big life-threatening event, the house burning down. But like you're kind of saying here, you're defining it that it comes in all these shapes and sizes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just knowing that everything that happens doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be traumatic either. So like a big event may not really stick with me in the
Mm.
way it might stick with someone else too. So it can go both ways, but it also depends on so many other factors, like what we call protective factors,
Oh.
which can be in a person's life of like their community, their support system, um, their childhood, how supported and loved they felt by their own parents, and all those things that help a person become more resilient. So sometimes there can be events that can really work quickly throughout the system, like say like a car accident. Um, in a bumper, I've known to work with someone who had a fender bender, no injury, not even really what do you call it? The car itself didn't have any impact on it, maybe like a smudge of paint. And it really shook this person's world.
Mm.
It was like it kind of woke up the shock in the person's system.
Mhm.
And so it really was an opportunity to kind of look beyond the car accident itself, the fender bender.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
yeah, there are a
really,
lot of factors that come into play that help offset the impact of a traumatic experience.
uh-huh. I really appreciate kind of what you're sharing with us to not diminish these things, like your example of the car accident. Like for her, that really shocked her nervous system, and this gets encoded in kind of our emotional brain, and so
Yeah.
it becomes something that stays in the body. And like you're saying, like what are some protective factors that can offset that? um, I heard this really interesting thing recently that for veterans from that came back from war with the PTSD, that if they had good social support, they were able to be more resilient to the
Yeah.
trauma. So
Yeah.
yeah, anything you can share about that?
Yeah. I mean, connection, social support is probably the biggest um, protective factor. Um, those core relationships, when they're healthy and supportive, can be really super helpful. So wherever people can get that, whether it's in their, church community or,
Mm.
work, or I've known a lot of people to have a lot of support with the people they work with because they see them every day. And a
Yeah.
lot of times people become really good friends because of that support that you can give to each other. I mean, you and I
Yeah.
had that, right? Like when we worked together, really that
Yeah.
support and connection.
Yeah.
And it really counts for a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Like for some of you who are just arriving into the call, Natalie and I worked together in hospice for several years. And, I think that one of the things that actually, looking back on it now, what has supported us and working in those situations was our ability to laugh. Like that
Yeah.
was maybe we might not have realized it then because we were a lot younger, but yeah, I mean, was that kind of, I guess, a protective factor for us?
Oh, absolutely. Humor is definitely one of the top uh one of the top coping. I'm laughing at right now because I'm thinking about some of the days the silly times we've had. Think about you working with people who are at the end of life. We've
Mhm.
had really great laughs with them. And a lot of
Yeah.
times people we're sitting with were the ones to tell a joke or,
Mm.
just really initiate the laughter. And I do believe it really is such a great, I don't know, it's just a great instinctual
Mm.
coping that we have. You don't have to think about, it can just come up, and we elicit in each other. You
Mhm.
know, you ever get an infectious laugh or someone laughs and then you laugh and you don't know what you're laughing at?
Yeah, it's a way that we can kind of soothe our own nervous system and process like these heavy, intense emotions. Like we don't want to like ignore the emotions that come up, like the fear and the overwhelm, but like
It
you
gives
mentioned,
levity.
levity. Yeah, it enables us to kind of get above it a little bit, that perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like those situations when death arrives suddenly, for example, a suicide or a car accident, the trauma of that experience, it can be overwhelming. Can you tell us about the overlap between trauma and grief?
Hmm. Yeah, I love this question. So grief in and of itself is so healthy for us. It's an experience that we all inherently have because we love. So, when we lose something or someone we love, that grief is going to come up in proportion to how much we love that person or that thing, that job, that whatever, right? And so that is not something that we want to like get rid of or like get beyond, because just because someone we love dies doesn't mean the love still lives. The love doesn't die. David Kessler is a grief expert that he wrote. I don't know if he wrote this book called Love Never Dies, or I know I'm pulling that from David Kessler. So if any of y'all are interested or learning any or reading anything about grief and how to get through it, he's great. But yeah, love never dies. And so that means grief really never goes away. And so it's what's so important is learning how to live with that grief.
Learned in this module.
Oh,
this is your final.
hold on. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
got
that's
you. Got it. Okay.
yeah. Now the trauma that you were mentioning, like, again, it's the experience, right? It's not the event. There's so many layers of trauma that happen in our relationships, in relational trauma. And I don't even really want to get too deep in it because then that's a whole rabbit hole itself.
Yeah.
But the idea that if we can hold grief without the trauma response, the stress response that comes with it, because the stress response inhibits us from a grief. And what's so important is that we follow a grief and really be with the grief so that we can live with it and eventually make meaning of it. Like how many times have you heard of someone who started a foundation or
wrote a book?
Wrote a book. Absolutely. Even David Kessler, he lost his son, and his son was in his 20s. It was sudden death, and he went on to write a book after that around what he learned from that and what he gained from it. And I think any of us would say we would trade all of this to have our loved ones back.
Of course.
All of it, right?
Yeah.
The foundation, all of it. But we can't get them back. And so it's so important to be able to have that grief.
So kind of like what you're sharing with us is that the trauma kind of keeps us in a stress response. And if we're in that stress response, it kind of hinders us from moving through the grief. Am I following that correctly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, if there can be a lot of layers around that, whereas like there can be guilt or shame around grief, and that can be that can be things to work through, to be able to have the grief. And so yeah, this one's a pretty deep topic, so I want to be careful about.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe.
But this idea that like you can have grief without trauma, and it's very human to have trauma with grief.
Yeah.
So to like really validate and normalize, like there's so many experiences where we weren't, it's usually trauma happens around what a trauma occurs, or we experience trauma from what we didn't get rather than what happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I want to be mindful that I'm going deep into it, but just the idea of like when we lose someone we love dearly, um, it can bring up some old traumas too.
Got it.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that the event and how the person died like starts this new trauma. It can actually bring up old stuff.
Sure. It's like it's a healing journey, isn't it, Natalie? Like,
It really is. Our whole lives are.
oh, totally. Yeah. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like it's okay to go into those deep, intense emotions. Like we want to feel them, as I hear you saying. And at the same time, having these protective ways to kind of resurface and come back to the levity.
Yeah. What you just said kind of triggered this thought of emotion can feel dangerous for people.
Oh, okay.
That's where you know that there's trauma, there's something around trauma here.
Uh-huh.
So if it doesn't feel okay to be sad or scared or right, like all these what we call the darker emotions,
Mm-hmm.
um, all of these emotions are for us to feel. Like they're here for a reason. It's like breathing. Like to say I can have these emotions, but I don't have these emotions. There's like no such thing.
Right.
If we can distract or be numb to them, but they're all here.
Yeah.
So if we experience emotion as dangerous or really intense, then we naturally just cut off from that. And so that's where you get people who can like just go to work the next day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not a judgment, it's not a good or bad thing. It's just how we cope. And I will personally say I've been in situations where I'm like, okay, I'm showing up to work. You know, we live in a world where you have to pay bills, and
Yeah.
maybe there are people at work that I'd love to see and get support.
Yeah. It's
But you
like
know,
life kind of pulls us along, doesn't it? Like even when we have grief and we're like, we want the world to stop. When something traumatic happens, grief happens, the life just will pull you forward.
that's right. It won't stop, but
Yeah.
we can pause and we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know what? That reminds me, like talking about the nervous system and how when, like even now, this might be triggering for some people listening. And if it's an opportunity to just slow down, like that can help us to really, like,
Yeah.
yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times when we're like triggered, and we can be triggered even in the smallest ways. So there may be somebody in this room who's feeling bored or not or tired.
Mhm.
And that can be a signal that something's happening, you know, that like this material or whatever this time is like it's kind of affected me in some way.
Mhm.
Um and so what helps kind of bring us back is like to ground a little bit,
Mhm.
and this is for anybody who wants to, but just to kind of like, you know, if you kind of walk you through a little bit, just notice your chair, notice like the seat you're sitting in or your sofa or, you know, wherever you're reclining, and just kind of notice like that, just notice the support of the chair. Like I'm kind of like bringing my attention to the seat, and I'm like feeling the seat and just wondering if you are, you know, like, do you feel the support? Do you notice the gravity here? Like there's a ground beneath us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And just notice the stillness just in that moment, you know, just sitting in my chair. Yeah. And if you want to wiggle a little bit, just so you can feel it more, you can wiggle or move. And right there, here you are, just for that 1 second. You know, here we are. Just like if we can be here for that 1 second at any time, it's a really good thing, because when we're out there is when we're in our anxiety, in our fear, in the trauma,
In our head.
in our heads. The thoughts are coming from what we're feeling in our bodies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Natalie, along these lines, like what, based on your somatic training and your experience, what might be some simple go-to steps if a person doesn't have access to a therapist or a counselor? What are some like techniques that you might suggest?
Yeah. So everybody's different, right? They're a different, um, we're all on different paths. We're all in different places in our path. And so for everybody, it can be really different. And I would encourage anybody that helps you feel connected to do that. Like when I say connected, that helps you feel good, that you're like, I don't know why I feel good, but it just feels good. So I really encourage a lot of my clients that I see to be involved in any kind of movement or exercise to help kind of re-engage with the body kind of thing, because a lot of times we're cut off from our bodies because it feels bad, it feels too much, it feels icky or overwhelming. And so whenever we can do anything to help us feel our heartbeats, our breathing, just feel ourselves in our body, I really encourage it. So, and I know people, and you can speak to this too, because you're a fitness, like for years, you're like this coach for years. I was like, all the good things that happen from moving, like, right, the good endorphins, but
Some
we
of our
don't have.
best experiences are from movement. I mean, when you think about it, a walk on the beach, holding your lover's hand, petting your puppy or kitten.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it doesn't have to require a lot of movement. So like if you're not able to move a lot, move what you can. So like, even just like some arm lifts, what is it like to lift those arms? Do you feel your arms, and feel the dance?
Get your chair dance happening. We got to do the Macarena. Oh my gosh.
Dance, right? Dance is like a lot of fun, so anything to help you feel connected to your body, I would recommend. Some people feel connected to their bodies in different ways, like taking a pottery class. So it may not be like this big all out movement, but it could be like this sensory experience, painting, something creative. But yeah, if you can't see therapists, I think one of the great things about the internet is that you can learn a lot about what's happening, around like what's possibly happening with grief and trauma. So learning about yourself. I have this book. Hold on, I'll grab it. If anybody's interested, it's kind of worn out, but The Body Keeps a Score is a popular, almost everybody that calls me is like, I read this book and really want to explore this more. The Body Keeps a Score really is a good book. It's really been popular lately. And so, reading about it and just kind of being curious, like how does this connect to you? And that can be a start. Support groups are great. Connection,
Yeah, that social support we were talking about earlier it could be a church or even a music group.
Yeah, or it can be just that one friend, that's going to listen to you and not judge and just hold space for you,
Your coach.
So, your coach, absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just, I wouldn't say common sense thing, but to really like emphasize, like, these are not just like fly by night kind of things. Like, we're not being indulgent by.
This is really helping us. Yeah. It's helping us to heal.
That's right. Yeah.
Totally. Well, so you shared some things like it's really about getting in the body. Like you mentioned, get in the body, get curious, soothing the nervous system. These are ways to get us like away from this external chaos that we might be feeling, and that inward orientation that I remember you kind of sharing with me before. Getting inwardly oriented, grounding in the body, putting your feet on the earth or filling your chair.
Yeah.
There's something to be said to just walking off your stress, talking to someone. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to take questions from everyone here today. But I know just from my experience coaching everyone in this study that I've heard a handful of people talk about being in narcissistic relationships, and I know this is a big rabbit hole we could go down. So we'll keep it a little bit surface level, but I wanted to be sure for those who have experienced this, there is trauma involved in that. And even after a person has left that relationship, they can often feel the shackles of what happened to them. What advice would you give to them for how to move forward and heal?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this definitely is a rabbit hole. But I will say, if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, I want to say like it can be like a spectrum. So like on the extreme end, malignant narcissist who's like, yeah, like it's in the DSM, like we can say they meet all the markers or whatever, but it's a spectrum. And I know a lot of people say this word is thrown around a lot. But if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it's a parent or a partner or anyone that's close to you, one of the things that comes from that is like you can feel like it's your fault, or that somehow you made that happen, because that's what the narcissist does, is that it's all about the person. And so to really recognize like, okay, it's not about me, it's what happened to me.
Okay.
And it's likely what happened to me before I got into the relationship with the narcissist. So to really just validate and normalize like, okay, that's behind me. And you can, not to say that we're not accountable for our bad behaviors, which can get murky for people, right? Of like, oh, well, you throw that book at them or whatever.
A slipper.
Yeah.
Whatever. That used to be my thing way back before I got mature. Well, Duck, watch the slipper.
I mean, a slipper is lighter than a book. But it can get murky for us of like, well, I'm not so innocent myself, so maybe I have and really encourage people, to like kind of step away from the blame game here and just really focus on you and what happened to you and how you can help yourself going forward. And one of the steps is really recognize like there was a toxic, there was some toxic stuff going on in here, and we didn't bring out the best in each other. Or it can really chip away at our self-esteem and our confidence about ourselves and who we are.
Yeah.
A lot of times we can be left with like zero self-esteem,
a lot of shame. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So just to kind of really go, okay, it's not me, it's what happened to me. And this is with anything in life. It's not me, it's what happened to me. I don't believe we're born inherently bad or good, kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I love how you said that. It's not me, it's what happened to me. Because that keeps us out of that stuck place when we can, like when we get lost in that story, we keep retelling the story, it can kind of keep us stuck. And kind of what I'm hearing you say is like, this happened, getting a little bit of space to create a new story for your life. Like our story creates our life. So if we can kind of empower ourselves in that way, like we
Yeah.
don't own that, like
Yeah, and to forgive ourselves, right? Like we're human.
yeah. So maybe that's a step. Forgive yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, for maybe choosing someone who did that to me, or who, or for staying in a relationship. But that's part of the narcissist, is that they really pull you in. They know how to pull you in. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of layers to that. But yeah, just to just really know, like, it's not you, and it's really not the narcissist either. And when I say that, again, they're responsible for bad behaviors, but that narcissism comes from really deep emotional wounding. And so there's work there for that person.
Yeah. Again, like just to bring us back, we are all on a healing journey. Like this is life, and these are opportunities when we get broken open like this, when these difficult, traumatic trauma events happen, experiences, these are opportunities that we can like self-actualize, we can grow, we can look within and like what is life wanting me to know, and letting our love grow for ourselves and for the world around us. Like yeah.
Yeah, it is. It can be the catalyst to push you into that journey in your life where you're walking towards self-love and self-acceptance. Yeah, and forgiveness.
Yeah. It's like we're all on this planet trying to be the healthiest, best versions of ourselves we can. And a lot of these things in our life, they're the catalyst for that, as you said. They're like we go to the gym to build these muscles. Like these things build our heart muscles. These things, grow our spirit and souls.
Absolutely. Yep. That's right. The emotional workout.
Yeah. So I would love to, like, if you're okay with it, Natalie, I would love to, like, I see Sandy has her hand up, and anyone else, this is the opportunity to ask your questions. So Sandy, if you're here with us now, feel free to ask your question.
Well, I'm a little bit breathless, so I'm still walking. This has been very interesting. And the last thing that you said, it's not the person, it's what happened to them. But just a little bit of a backstory that leads up to my question. My son-in-law has PTSD from his war experiences. He was a special forces soldier and has 2 silver stars and bronze stars and purple hearts and all that kind of stuff. He's now 45 years old, so that he's probably 10, 12 years removed from that. But he is diagnosed PTSD. It was enlightening to hear that he had all the emotion. He has the same normal emotions as everybody else, but some have been suppressed. For me, it is traumatic. It causes me trauma to go be there because and all this trauma from war, I think, piggybacks on a somewhat dysfunctional childhood. But what causes me trauma is that my daughter bears the brunt of it. And it's not physical at all. It's just him losing his cool and ranting. And I think there's some elements, I don't know that I would call it narcissistic, but it becomes about him. And but unfortunately, his support group is other veterans who have experienced some of the same things, which I think is unhealthy, but that's what he identifies with. He loves to go hunting so that he can kill things. He says to provide meat for his family. I'm sure there's an element of that, but it scratches an itch for him. And so I guess 2 questions I have is the trauma that I feel for my daughter and my grandsons. And I don't want you to get the wrong impression. He's not like throwing things, getting physical, but he's like this stuff. It's like And fortunately, they live in another state, so I'm not around it every day. But are those same techniques? I would assume those same techniques would be effective for me, even though I didn't. I guess he is an experience. But how do you feel about guided hallucinogenic therapy, which is
wow.
something?
I wasn't expecting that one. Whoa.
Actually, I love that question because I'm learning a little bit about that because I have some good friends who are trained in it. I think this is a new. So to speak to that, Sandy's asking about psychedelic assisted therapy, right, Sandy?
Yes, and I can tell you from my teenage years that it's very mind expanding. And so
Yes.
I can see the benefit of it. I don't condemn it at all.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
really new. It's not really new. It's
no.
just being resurrected.
We do have the baby boomers represented here, so it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Okay.
The government
So
research this.
Yeah. So it's been underground mostly. So it has been going on in like places like California. It's been a real underground thing. And so now we're seeing it becoming more mainstream and like people starting to see some turning in the law of like maybe we can see this happen. I have two opinions about it. I think it's great because we need all that we can get to help, especially our veterans who've been through some real, I mean, just the
Horrible.
most awful, yeah. Horrible. That really to help them not relive those memories. I think it would be really helpful. And what I'm hearing is making me feel hopeful in the profession that I'm in. And another thing, it's new in the way that it's more mainstream. And so that means we have to be really careful about who the providers are and that anything new is going to have to work out kinks in the beginning. And so I do worry about the vulnerability for people who are doing this. So just to kind of it's a little bit worry in that concern, like, you know, that there is some vulnerability for the clients and patients who undergo that.
Well, maybe I should have said self-guided hallucinogenics.
Yeah. I can't really speak to that, but but I have heard of people who do it on their own, where they microdose.
Right, that's what he does. He does.
I would really encourage him to see somebody. I know it's obviously not possible to see someone who would do psychedelic assisted right now in Louisiana, but to have someone help him as he navigates through that, because it sounds like he would benefit from, because the thing about psychedelics is that it can be mind expanding and it can really help you shift. But with the problem that I could see happening is that it might not be embodied. And it's really important to have, this is what I do in my work, is to help.
It might not be what?
Like an embodied experience. Like he might not really be feeling it in his body. And so that trauma is still stored in his body to a certain extent.
Like this trauma, these emotions are energy.
Versus his mind, or are you referring to the mind when you say body?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really separate because, so when I say, so think of it like this. When he went through these experiences, it was a shock to his nervous system, right? And so whenever he's going out in the world, things feel like a threat. When he screams, when he loses his temper, that's a protective mechanism for him, right? So that's saying things don't feel safe for him. When you do psychedelics, it can be such a isolating experience where you're feeling a shift in your mind, but then when you finish it, is that trauma out of your body, right? Out of the nervous system, where he can go and not feel as much fear when he's having a conversation with his wife. And so there's a lot more to this that I probably can't expand on too much, but just to say, I would recommend that he seek help with that, and to say, hey, I'm microdosing, because some therapists may be able to work with him on that, you know.
Yeah, well, I would recommend that too, but he's, still macho,
Yeah.
special forces, but he
Hey,
still experiences the trauma to where he still has nightmares where he's trembling and calling out. So it's,
so I will give you this. I have a stepbrother who actually has a practice. He's a veteran. He actually works with war veterans, and he does trauma therapy. So I can give Natalie.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, he's out on, well, actually, what state does he live in?
He lives north of San Antonio, Texas, in Burnington.
Yeah, my stepbrother's in Louisiana, but
Yeah,
I'll give her information just in case he can help.
okay.
And thanks, Sandy, that was a really interesting question.
No problem.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what you're talking about being embodied is like, so often we get disconnected. We live from the chin up. That's kind of like our culture. We're so heady that we miss like you're talking about really getting it into our body. And I think like there's an unclearness of what that even means. So like, yeah, like what you were talking about earlier, feel the chair. Like when your nervous system, when you feel anxiety, you feel like once it gets to your gut, your nervous system is online, and that might be a sign to get embodied. Is there anything you can say about that, Natalie?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we feel anxious, the instinct is going to be, let me do something to not feel anxious.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. But anytime that you have an opportunity to be curious where the anxiety isn't so high that you can be like, oh, I feel a little bit of something in my stomach, it's like a little bit of a twisting, and even just to name it. So here's one thing you can take home today that I recommend for people: just naming stuff, and naming it to someone that you're with or like talking to, like, hey, Natalie, I'm feeling like a little bit of like twist in my stomach. I think it's fear. And just to name it can help bring the anxiety down. And I've known people do this when anxiety attacks or panic attacks, where they like talk to someone in the room and they go, okay, just so you know, I'm having a little bit of a panic attack. I'll be okay, but I just need you to know that. And then that person responds and goes, okay, well, let me know how I can help. And then it comes down. So if you can name it, describe it, sometimes it'll just go away. Sometimes it won't, but it's something to play with.
I recently heard that if we just drop into those emotions, like if we're feeling the anxiety, if we're feeling the overwhelm, like, oh my gosh, I got this whole house to clean and I got to do this and I got to do that. And all of these pressures we put on ourselves, if we can just drop into that for 90 seconds, it actually, you'll notice it, even grief, it kind of dissipates.
Yeah, it won't kill us. There's not been an emotion that kills us. Maybe suppressed emotions that cause stress on our, system and has us do things. But yeah, I think to find safety with emotion. So like if you're staying with it long enough and you like feel the shift itself, it helps to kind of send a signal, like say to your brain, like, okay, fear is safe. There's not a tiger chasing after me. I'm not going to die. And you can feel the temperature come down.
Nat, it's kind of like that emotional brain, right? To relate it to brain health, like that emotional brain is really, it's kind of like, it's like a little kid or a baby animal, so like you're suggesting if we talk to it, if that kind of imagery helps to like, just talk to yourself like you would to a little baby, because that's that part of us.
I would imagine, I love that. Yeah. I would imagine that everybody has ways that they are coping. Go to those ways that you're coping that are healthy and don't hurt you. Do it. So like, I'm not giving you anything new. I just really want to encourage that. So like, yeah, if it's talking to my like inner child and like helping to soothe that inner child, for another person, it might be triggering to talk to their inner child. They don't want to do that. And that's okay too. But it could be like planting something in my garden, or, you know,
because that's
playing
getting
with,
you in the moment. Yeah, like
yeah, anything that helps you feel like present, like I'm not out here in my thoughts. I'm not anything, you know, like Sandy, you're on that walk, like
yeah.
that walk, that's great, you know, feel your feet, you know, like that is helping you be in that present moment when you can kind of just pay attention to your feet. If what it, you know, those what do you call it, labyrinths? I don't know if you ever walked a labyrinth,
Yeah.
but they have one in Lafreniere Park, I know of. In some parks you'll find a labyrinth. Find a labyrinth, walk the labyrinth, and do it slowly and see
And
how it
that's
feels.
kind of like a meditation walk, right, Nat? That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. It's like a meditation walk. You just follow it. Do you want to rush? Do you want to go fast? Is it okay to go slow? You know?
I mean, this life, it's so beautiful. And I know we can get like these things can really get us like so disembodied. I know we're throwing that word around, but it can really take us away from that appreciation of life. And like these things, anytime we can connect with life head on, if it's feet on the ground, if it's in the water, if it's just taking a shower, like these things connect us back to the simplicity of life right now.
Yeah, anything that helps you feel disconnected. And you know, before we do end, I know we're close to ending, but for any of us in this group that have experienced like significant trauma that's like unspeakable, or that, you know, has been hard to even name or to acknowledge, like there is no right or wrong in this process, on this healing path. And to just really be gentle with yourselves, to say like, this is what I need now. I need this to be in this box and it's been closed away. And that's just where it's going to be for now.
Yeah.
And you can start there, but it's acknowledging like what is so present for you now, and that it's okay. It's okay to keep it in that box, because some things are so unspeakable that it could be so overwhelming to just even name it. So if you acknowledge it with yourself, like it has to just be here, that's good enough.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a question? We have just a few more minutes with Natalie here today, and she is actually going to be coming back in November to talk more about grief. But if you have a question, yeah,
Y'all are brave.
I know.
I appreciate everybody showing up. Yeah.
Any final closing thoughts that you would have for our community today?
Well, thanks for being here. I mean, it's an hour of your day that you could have spent doing something else. And to talk about grief and trauma is like, I don't think anybody really wants to like delve into it too much. But, you know, it's like Natalie, like you said, if you spend enough time in something and you realize it's not threatening, and that then you know, like here's a conversation that y'all were able to sit through and listen, or maybe not listen, but the fact that you're here is a step. And I encourage anyone to speak to a coach or a therapist, or, you know, support group, or just someone somewhere where they feel that there's like trust there for you to start just talking about whatever is okay for you to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalie. Just to summarize, like we're all on this healing journey, and none of us escape this life without experiencing some traumatic experience, loss, deep, intense emotions. And kind of what I'm gathering from your expertise today is just to be curious, hold yourself gently, to name those feelings and emotions, to just focus on you. Like if you've been and you experienced a traumatic relationship. It could be from childhood or adulthood. Just focus on you and do those things that make you feel good, and get support when you can.
Yeah, and it's not selfish to focus on you. A lot of people can say, well, that's self-indulgent. Like, it doesn't feel comfortable to just like make it about me. But you're only yourself. It's like you got to live with your one life and you. And so the focus has to be on you. So yeah, it's not indulgent. Take care of yourself.
Totally. Like when we take care of ourselves, it actually helps us to take care of other people. And I know we all know this, but it's like we need constant reminding about it. So thank you for that reminder for that. And Natalie, how can people keep in touch with you?
Yeah, well, you're welcome to email me if you want any resources that can help. But my website is just my name. It's nataliebellott.com. I haven't really started this, but I do like writing. And so I have a newsletter that I'd like to start kind of updating and maybe start a blog. So if anybody's interested in reading more or, curious about learning more, I encourage you to leave your email there. It's just on my homepage. There's a newsletter email button that you can put your email in. And yeah, I really appreciate being here. I'm excited to do part 2. And if y'all have some ideas of maybe where you want it to go more, just let Natalie know and we can discuss it, because this is really for you. It's, for your enjoyment and learning. So yeah, thank you. And Sandy, I want to say a sincere thanks to your son-in-law for his service. And I really hope and wish the best for him and that he gets the help he needs. And thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So
thank you all for coming today. And we hope to see you back in November with Natalie talking about grief. So yeah, until then, have a great day, everyone.
all right, thanks guys. Bye. Bye, Natalie. Thank you.
Bye.